layers, so many different layers. So I'm really looking forward to hearing your thoughts. So firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land upon which we meet today and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and encourage you to pay your respects to the traditional owners of the lands upon which you sit today. And if you'd like to acknowledge those in the chat, you may do so. Personally, I extend my respects to the Gombanger peoples upon whose lands I am currently sitting, to their elders past, present and emerging, and to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are present here today. Thank you for your many years of custodianship. And talking of meaning and, okay, let's take a step back actually, meaning and purpose. You know, the meaning and purpose for the traditional owners of this land was, I was going to say it's different, but at its core level, it would be the same. We're all human beings. But for them, meaning and purpose was all about country, was all about tradition, was all about kinship, and was all about the relationship between them as people and with the country itself. The country, the country was alive. The country was a living, breathing thing, and the purpose and meaning for Australia's Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people was to take care of that country. Really, a real deep understanding that you take care of the country, and it will take care of you. And when you look at it through a modern lens, you can see that this is a culture that survived for 70,000 years. And so from that perspective, it was a very successful purpose. It was a very successful meaning. It was a way of living that was able to sustain a people for many, many thousands of years. And we have to ask ourselves whether our way of living is likely to yield the same longevity of results. So I'm a psychological coach at Uprise. I'm a psychotherapist and counsellor. I'm also a solicitor. I'm a trainer of psychotherapists, counsellors and psychologists, and a supervisor of clinical practitioners as well. So often when I'm doing my work, I'll draw on my own clinical experience and I'll draw on my training and supervision experience. Post your questions in the chat, please. Questions, comments, responses to any of the questions that I might ask you. And then at the end of the webinar, you'll get a feedback. Link that we ask you to complete, because that's really helpful for us to improve our future webinars and to know how we're going. Okay, numbers are really creeping up. Thanks, guys. Good to have you here. For those that have joined recently, welcome. So in the Uprise app or website, uprise.co, one of the first things that you come across is a reminder or a prompt to check your well-being. And this is a way of monitoring your mental well-being over time. Monitoring is a very useful tool that's used commonly in psychology as a way of giving kind of a biofeedback, so that you're saying, well, it's very hard to track our own happiness over long periods of time. We think we were happier previously, but the only way to do it really is to actually have a way of going, okay, this is how I feel at this particular moment. 3 months later, this is how I feel. 3 months later, this is how I feel. 3 months later, this is how I feel. And then you look back over time, and then you'll have a sense of whether you're moving forwards or whether you're moving downwards, or whether you're actually in some kind of cycle. So take just a minute to check your own well-being score. So one way of defining meaning is the extent to which one's life is experienced as making sense, as being directed and motivated by valued goals, and as mattering in the world. And so as we're going through this, it's an opportunity for each of us to take a moment to use this 30 minutes to say, okay, what is my purpose in life? What meanings do I glean from life? And this definition gives us a bit of a backbone. To what extent do you feel that your life makes sense? To what extent do you feel that your life is directed and motivated by goals that you value, goals that are important to you? And to what extent do you feel that your goals, your personal goals, connect to more global, more universal, more generally human issues and matters? And do you feel that connection to the wider world and between what you're doing and the world more generally? We don't really have a good handle on meaning in the psychological sciences. the psychology isn't actually a good place to look necessarily for finding meaning and purpose. Where we look for our understandings of meaning and purpose tend to be in philosophy. In psychology, in the psychological sciences, this is some of the quotes. We're not sure exactly where meaning comes from, if it's inherent or if it's real in any way at all. What we do know, and this does come from the psychological sciences, what we do know is that humans flourish when they have it and suffer when they don't. And that's pretty crucial, isn't it? And it just talks to the centrality of meaning in our lives. I think I've been watching a show. I don't know who else has been watching Alone. Just give us a wave or thumbs up or something if you've been watching Alone recently on SBS. I've been finding it really interesting from a psychological perspective. Yeah, it's a program about survival, and you think it's going to be a program about survival, and then very quickly you realise it's not about survival. It's about aloneness, and it's about humans' capacity to be on their own. And I think we really underestimate the importance of relationships, human relationships to us, right up until we don't have them. And it's at that point that we realise how valuable they are to us. Meaning and purpose, I think, is very much the same. If you've got a life that's fairly meaningful and purposeful, then you don't really recognise the importance of it. It's just something that you do, something that you take for granted. But when you find yourself living a life without meaning, without purpose, or the purpose that you had, you find that the purpose that you had is stripped away from you. And so this will be the experience of people in flood-affected areas. My personal experience was in bushfire-affected areas. And what happens is that when this event comes through, you're kind of busy with your life, you're doing your things, you're involved in your community, and then suddenly this massive event comes through, and literally, bushfire comes raging through, the flood comes raging through, and suddenly that old meaning and purpose is gone. Now, you might find a temporary meaning and purpose in the recovery process, in the rebuilding process, in the bringing the community together process, but what happens after a lot of these events is that people lose their pre-existing meaning and purpose, and then they try and get it back. And in trying to get it back, they realize that the meaning and purpose that they had in their lives actually doesn't hold the same meaning that it had before. And they need to start again. They literally need to push the reset button on, who am I? Why am I here? Why am I doing the things that I'm doing? So the sources of meaning and purpose that we know about, personal identity, having a sense of, who I am, this is me. Having a purpose, having a goal. So having a goal is really helpful. And, we've known this in psychology. It's used in life coaching very effectively. It's used in organizations very effectively. We set a goal. Once we set that goal, it gives our minds a future point. Just trying to get my hand on the screen, a future point to aim towards. And then that future point to aim towards psychologically gives us a sense of purpose. As I mentioned with the show Alone, really highlighting that relationships and connection are a huge source of purpose. I remember when I was in my mid-20s or something, and I was having a conversation with someone. I said, I don't know what my life's about. I had a quarter-life crisis. I got my midlife crisis over and done with in my 20s. But it was a real kind of crisis of meaning and purpose, and wondering, who am I? What am I doing? I don't want to do what I'm doing. How did I even get here? Now that I'm here, I was a lawyer. I didn't want to be a lawyer. I had no interest in being a lawyer, but I didn't know that. I kind of just had sort of put one foot in front of the other, being guided in a particular direction. Then I sort of almost woke up one day and went, I don't want to be here. This isn't my life that I'm living. And so I was having this conversation with a friend, and she said, I don't get it. She said, my friends, my family, that's all I need. That is my meaning and purpose, and everything else just fits in around that. And of course, that pointed to my disconnection from family, my disconnection from friendships that I was experiencing at that point in my life. New experiences and excitement can give you a sense of meaning and purpose. A lot of people I've been talking to this year, you can imagine, particularly people in their 20s and 30s, really talking about, got to get overseas, got to get overseas, got to get overseas. So COVID stripped from them kind of what's become, a typical cultural source of meaning and purpose for us here in Australia, which is the finish studies, whether high school or whether university, and then head overseas and seek out new and different cultural experiences, broaden one's horizons, gain a deeper sense of understanding and connection to the world beyond, beyond the home or the city or the town that I live in. Experiencing growth provides a sense of meaning and purpose, and growth is very individual, of course, and it looks towards a sense that I am becoming more than I was, and hopefully becoming towards something that is meaningful to me. And when we look at experiencing growth, often we point to the classic myths like Ulysses that talk to, and any movie, any sort of classic movie that we watch today that talks about going on a journey, leaving one's comfort zone, usually going through a dark night of the soul where things seem helpless, hopeless, pointless, and you go into a state of despair, and then you find something within yourself that gives you the strength and courage to overcome that despair. You reach out, or reach in, and you find something deeper, and you survive, you persevere, and that's the experience of growth. The other thing that contributes to a sense of meaning and purpose is contribution to a greater good, and the classic example of this one is volunteering. And when I'm talking to people, I try and talk to them about what is important to them, because you don't just you kind of can go and do any old volunteering. It's a good way to get in. But what's important is that you find something that's personally meaningful to you, and because it's a cause that you believe in. And often when I'm talking to people, I'm like, well, when you're watching the news, when you're scrolling through Facebook, when you're browsing the internet, what do you get angry about? What do you start shouting about? What really gets you? What's the unfairness or injustice or inconsistency in the world that really gets you? And how can you pursue that? And you often encounter in those discussions a response from people, like it's a kind of an immediate response of kind of, who am I to make that change in the world? I don't have that power. I don't have that influence. I don't have that capacity to make a difference in that space. And invariably, with a little bit of talking about it, they start to go, hang on, why do I think that? Why have I always thought that thing that I'm so angry at or annoyed about or passionate about is over there and I'm over here? How hard is it for me to actually start taking steps towards that? And very often it's not that hard at all. And it is a matter of just taking the first step in that direction towards that passion. Interested to hear any of your thoughts and feelings that are coming up at the moment, and also, your current, given what we've talked about just now, what's your sense of where you find meaning and purpose in your life? I can't see when people are chatting. At least in Teams, I can see that, oh, this person's typing, that person's typing, helping others. Where do you find it in your life? Come on, we've got 100 people in the room. It's got to be at least 100 responses, probably more. Family, doing something I enjoy for work, traveling, being creative, mentoring others, new experiences, working in the arts, family, work, supporting other people, hobby, like photography, children, looking after my mum, being in nature, sport. Hard to contribute over COVID. It would be good to get back into the community to volunteer again. Meaningful relationships, knowledge gathering, being healthy, mutual support, helping animals, struggling. Someone's struggling with meaning at the moment. Thank you. Being kind and compassionate, feeling connected with nature. So a good question to ask now that you've sort of go, this is what's meaningful to me. So we've got a few more: protecting the environment, family, friends, staying healthy. Well, one got deleted. Being around family. Is to ask yourself, why? What is it about this that gives me meaning and purpose? What is it that's crucially important to me? And a way of interrogating that is, okay, so when I do that, what does that do for me? What does that give me? And when I get that, what does that do for me? Finding the right button. Someone's just added, trying to make the world a slightly better place than it could be for my kids. Yeah, often now, once we have children, meaning and purpose often does start to become about descendants. It becomes about the kind of world that we're leaving behind, being curious about the kind of world we grew up in, and often we're nostalgic about the kind of world that we grew up in, and often we're concerned about the world that we're living in now, and concerned about the world that we might leave for our children. And so it becomes becomes meaningful to take steps towards and work towards making the world a better place for our kids. So this is a quote from Viktor Frankl. If you don't know Viktor Frankl, he wrote a classic text. He's a psychiatrist. He wrote a classic text called Man's Search for Meaning. So just forgive him, because he was writing in the after World War II, and when everything was gendered. And his experience, Viktor Frankl's experience, was that he was taken to a concentration camp in Poland. He's Austrian, and he was separated from his wife and child, who were taken to another concentration camp. And as a psychiatrist, he sort of went through the same morose despair that every other Jew taken into a concentration camp went through. They didn't know that their fellows were being exterminated, but they knew that things weren't good. And certainly one of the things that was done to them was that they had their identity stripped away. The clothing were taken away, their glasses were removed, their hair was shaved, they were put in identical clothing. Any sort of feelings they had in their mouth were removed. And he became curious about survival rates. And he just noticed that there were some people who couldn't find hope, who got swallowed up by despair and didn't survive. They tended to die quite quickly. And then he noticed that there were other people that tended to persevere, to look and to find every little possibility for hope, every little way of fighting back, every little opportunity for safe resistance. They would take it. And he realized that he was one of those people. And as he thought about it, he realized, well, he'd adopted two things. One was that he'd undertaken to use his experience in the concentration camp as a source of knowledge and research that, should he ever be released, he could then make use of in the world, knowing that there were many tens of thousands of people, as it turned out, hundreds of thousands of millions of people who were in a similar situation to him. And he also realized that he was holding on to hope. He was holding on to the possibility that his wife and child might be alive and that he might be reunited with them after the war. And this, he realized, was the thing that kept him and the other people who stayed alive, kept them hopeful, was meaning and purpose. He had a reason to stay alive. And in that context of having all things stripped away, having all freedoms stripped away, he realized that everything can be taken from a man, but the last of human freedoms. And that is to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. And this fundamental core aspect of freedom forms the essence of existential philosophy, and also existential approaches to therapy, of which there's many, and of which many even contemporary psychological approaches sort of draw on these ideas, to realize that freedom isn't necessarily about doing what you want when you want. Freedom is about choosing how you respond to any given situation, and realizing that people can take anything away from you, but they can't take that away from you. And so there's meaning in how you choose to respond to your circumstances. There's meaning in the capacity to decide for yourself how you want to feel how you want to respond, how you want, what mood you want to bring, what attitude you want to bring to whatever's happening around you. Now, exercising that freedom is really difficult because as living beings, we're subject to conditioning. And conditioning sort of belongs at the opposite end of the therapeutic spectrum. It belongs to behaviorism and behavioral therapy, which is the kind of the cornerstone of the psychological approach. Because, behavior is measurable. And all behavior, in that model, all behavior is conditioned. And we are heavily conditioned beings. We're conditioned by our parents, we're conditioned by our experiences, we're conditioned by our culture, we're conditioned by our media, we're conditioned by our governments, we're conditioned by large corporations. You watch the Social Dilemma, and you'll see how principles of conditioning are used to sort of force responses from us that seem out of our control. And so taking control of one's attitude and response to any given situation is no mean feat. It takes effort, it takes consciousness, it takes awareness. Joseph Campbell wrote Heart of Darkness, and Heart of Darkness is actually one of those stories about going into the dark night of the soul and being, achieving growth and renewal through that process. Joseph Campbell writes, life has no meaning, but each of us has meaning, and we bring it to life. It is a waste to be asking the question when you are the answer. So this then puts another helpful spin on the situation. Because often we're saying, particularly the young people, this happened to me when I was in my 20s, I was like, hang on, what the hell is the point of life? And Friedrich Nietzsche kind of kicked all this off in the modern era when he sort of turned his back on God. And Friedrich Nietzsche was the dean of a central university in Germany, and dean of philosophy. And he realized that in order to actually be free in his thinking, he had to give up his position, because within the university, within the very, very Catholic Church dominated Europe that he lived in, within a monarchy, there were certain requirements about how he would think philosophically. And so he left, and he was cast adrift, and he was supported by this composer Wagner, and that's where he did most of his writing. And he did a lot of writing about, one of his main books is called, I think it was a book. It was one of his lines is "God is dead," and what he meant was, okay, if there's no God, what then? What does it mean to be a human being? And that's been very influential. If you think about where we're up to in our society and how we live in a very much a secular society now, you can see how those ideas have actually filtered through and throughout the culture, where many of us are able to go, you know what, I don't need God to have meaning and purpose. Many people still, find purpose and meaning through God and God's words and Allah's words and other religious teachings. And that's fine. But it's what Joseph Campbell is suggesting, and what Nietzsche was suggesting, was that we need to look to ourselves to go, okay, what is meaningful to me? Looking outside actually is often not helpful. Frankl also went on to say, for the meaning of life differs from person to person, from day to day, and from hour to hour. What matters, therefore, is not the meaning of life in general, but rather the specific meaning of a person's life at a given moment. So we're often looking for this kind of great meaning and purpose, but actually where the thinkers of the past are suggesting we focus is, first of all, on ourselves and what's important and meaningful to us. And in a moment, I'm going to talk about values, because on the one hand, we have goals, but on the other, we have values. Values tend to be intrinsic. Goals tend to be something that we aim for in the future. And living in accordance with those values in each moment, making conscious choices about how we respond to each moment of our life, and choosing a response that's most aligned with what's important to us. And so you can see how it can take some reflection, some thinking about, okay, what is important to me? What do I value in life? And I actually did this activity with a woman the other day, where we went through her values, and we prioritized her values, and it was very easy to see that as we prioritized them, we put them in a ranking from 1 to 10. She was able to sort of start to get a very, very clear sense. And when you do this, you do have this shifting of perspective of reality, where you go, oh, wow, that is my primary value. Because if your primary value and your secondary value become in conflict, then, or to act with authenticity, then you're going to act in accordance with your primary value, but to the greatest extent as possible, also incorporating your second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th value. So how do you cultivate a sense of meaning and purpose? So we touched on this at the beginning. Start with your physical health. Physical health is the foundation for everything in mental health. And physical health is made up of what you put into your body, it's your diet, what you do with your body, that's the movement of physical exercise, and then sleep. And if you can master sleep and what you put in, and healthy food going into your body, drinking lots of water, not too much alcohol, not very little drugs, and getting some good physical exercise, sleep, exercise, then you've got a great foundation. Express yourself. Yeah, so many of us are repressed and suppressed, and we censor ourselves. Pay attention to how much you feel like you censor yourself, and that's about values. You're censoring yourself because you value being included by the group, and you believe that if you censor yourself, then the group will accept and include you. Often people do this to your detriment. A gentleman that I was talking to just a couple of days ago was talking about how he won't say certain things because that upset his partner. He holds things back at work because he knows that will upset people, and yet now he's finding that he's full of rage, and he doesn't know what to do with it. And what happens is that every time we don't express ourselves, we kind of park a little bit of resentment and rage inside of us that eventually has to go somewhere. Practice gratitude. Attitude of gratitude goes a long way. The easiest thing to do with gratitude is to start a gratitude journal. Write down 3 to 5 things a day, even one on a bad day. Just say, I am grateful for. I'm grateful that the sun's out. I mowed the lawns today. I'm grateful that I got a chance to mow the lawns before the rains come this afternoon. And I'm grateful to be here to be able to talk about this important topic with you. Commit to a cause. We're talking about volunteering. What are you passionate about? Go do something about it. You've got to do something about it. Follow moments of bliss. Yeah, look around your life. An approach called narrative therapy talks about sparkling moments, that if you look around your life, you'll see even the darkest life, you'll see little glimmers of starlight. Move towards them. Be curious about them, and then be curious about, how do I create more moments of this in my life? Be of service to others. It's huge benefits in terms of sense of meaning and purpose and connection. Angela, I'll just get you to pop the feedback link in the chat. So I'm running over a bit. Learn and grow. Go back and do a course you've always wanted to do. That's a topic that often comes up in conversations. I always wanted to do. There's my alarm. Always wanted to do this. No, I haven't done it. It's too late now. Had someone saying to me, "Oh, look, I'm almost 40. It's too late to go back to uni now." And I said, "Oh my God, my brother-in-law is 44. He's gone back to study law. My other mate was 43, and he enrolled in a medical degree. My sister was 42 when she enrolled in a veterinary science degree, and all of them, one's now a lawyer, one's now a doctor, one's now a veterinary surgeon, and they're all doing things that they love doing, and they weren't scared to try. There was no, it's too late. My dad did it. My dad always wanted to be a doctor, and he goes, I think by the time he was 35, he decided it was too late, and now he's in his late 70s, and he could probably still be practicing as a doctor. All right, so in Uprise, we've got a personal values module. You can go into the Uprise app. You should all have it, most of you, if not all. Have a look at the app, do those exercises, reveal your personal values, and see if you can live a life in accordance with them. All right, we'll finish it there. There's the key takeaways. Thanks, everyone. Great to be with you today. Hope you took something and take something from today's webinar. I hope you find that meaning and purpose in your own life. Thank you.